And welcome back. Now, from midnight on Sunday, the 20th of September, South Africa will move to level 1 of the national lockdown. And this means that there will be an easing of restrictions starting on Monday. President Cyril Ramaphosa made the announcement last night, saying that international travel will be allowed from October. And most medical experts are also in favor of easing restrictions and opening up of the economy, given the declining rate in COVID-19 infections and transmissions. But there is also a strong call for South Africans to continue to be very cautious and to exercise good hygiene protocols. So, are we ready to move to alert level 1? Joining us now to discuss this is political analyst Sandile Swana. Good morning, Sandile. Thanks for speaking to us.
Thank you so much, Sakina. Good morning to you and your listeners.
So your take on moving to lockdown alert level 1, do you think it was the right thing? Is it a pressure that we are bowing to? What's your take on this?
Sakina, I think all of us have got to accept that on a day-to-day basis, we live with germs, all sorts of germs in South Africa and the world as a whole. So the only thing that we've done over time is to develop health and safety measures and other measures so that we can live relatively well with all germs. This is just one other germ. Now, the reason why we had to have the lockdown was because the rate of infections was higher than you could manage on a normal basis. So that was really the issue. Otherwise, COVID-19 is actually a health and safety issue, and we needed to check up our health and safety issue and continue with our lives as normal. And secondly, we cannot stay in lockdown forever for any reason, including a jab.
And of course, one of the big ones, Sandile, was the easing of restriction on international travel from October the 1st. Now, the president said that you would need a negative COVID-19 test that's not later than 72 hours old for you to be allowed in. And South Africans may be informed of this, but do visitors coming in know? And how do we best go about now as a country to make them aware of this? Do you think government will be able to manage this process as they've outlined, at least as we heard from the president? Do you think they'll be able to manage this effectively?
Yes, I think it will be managed quite effectively. Let's remember that the people who come here generally from a tourism perspective, they come from the US, UK, Germany, France, and maybe forgetting one other country. Those are the main sources. So those countries themselves have got lists and requirements of what it takes for any business visitor or a tourist to come to their own countries. So they've got those criteria. So embassies and nations and departments of health internationally are exchanging this information on a continuous basis. Again, in South Africa, a lot of people who come here come from the SADC countries. In many ways, the SADC countries and African countries generally have not been that negatively affected by COVID-19. So again, people will know, even ordinary people who travel by bus and taxis and so on, this information around SADC travel is quite easy.
So looking at the easing of restrictions, Sandile, and within the tourism sector particularly, the right decision, would you say? Because a lot of hopes were pinned on the tourism sector to actually help revive our country's economy before the advent of the pandemic. So this easing of these restrictions, are you positive that this will have the desired impact?
Yes, it's not going to be immediately very large volumes of tourists and large revenues. But as you travel around the country, which I have done, you can see the B&Bs are open. I'm in a hotel establishment even right now. So it's opening up. But what we also need to understand is that the whole idea of a risk-managed lockdown is that you may well find that a lot of the places in the Kruger and other places where these holiday destinations are have, in any case, even at maximum lockdown level 5, there was not too much of COVID-19 infections in those areas. It was a general precaution for the whole country. And the other thing is that those establishments and the municipalities around them, the provinces that they are in, they need to have early warning systems to be fully alert at all times of what the COVID-19 situation is in each particular ward, in each particular local municipality, and in each district, so that they don't pull people into dangerous situations. But I am quite confident that where our major tourism destinations are, it's relatively safe to go there.
And then we look at the president addressing some economic issues. And of course, as usual, the outcry has been in some quarters that there's not enough detail. He did, however, say that Labour, business and government have made some progress at NEDLAC in formulating a comprehensive economic plan that will get the country going forward. But let's just talk about that for a moment, Sandile Swana, because we had been struggling to kickstart the South African economy way before COVID-19 came along. So how are we going to do it now? Because this could be seen as an opportunity for South Africa to actually get itself on a radical trajectory towards kickstarting the economy. But what would that look like? What does that mean?
Yeah, I think the most important word in your question is the word radical, which means that the methods that we've used from 2009, which are conservative, austerity-driven type of methods that were not even being implemented by the United States and the UK, who are our role models in the economy, rightly or wrongly. So, for instance, in 2009, the so-called stimulus package that was launched to take us out of the 2008 fallout, the Dean of the Economics at UCT made it quite clear that it was way substandard, way too small. Right now, even the so-called 500 billion, the likes of Tumakubule and many major economists in the country have made it completely clear that this is an austerity-driven reshuffling of existing budgets. So what needs to be radical is that if we say our budget for last year, 2019, was 100 rand, then you need to add on top of that and say, I'm adding 50 rands. What tends to happen under Tito Mboweni and the Reserve Bank governor is that they tend to take budget from one category to another rather than adding, so that it's an injection into the economy. There is no injection. So we need a major injection, probably driven by the Reserve Bank, and into viable, highly profitable infrastructure project with high economic multipliers and high labor absorption rate. So that is what has been lacking since 2009. Hence, this depression that we are in now came on top of what you might have called a long-term recession of one kind or the other, because our growth trajectory has been going downward since 2009.
And then we look at the number of South Africans who've been dependent on social grants before the lockdown. I think we were looking at a number in the region of 17 million social grants being issued by the South African Social Security Agency. The president last night saying that the COVID-19 UIF relief fund, for example, will be extended to the end of the state disaster, which will now be on the 15th of October. But if you look at what's happened and how many people have lost their jobs during this pandemic and how many more people have become dependent on some or other form of grant from government, how do you see this playing out, Sandile Swana? What is going to happen to the poorest of the poor once, for example, the SRD grant, that 350 Rand grant, is no longer available to help people along?
There is a lot of different things that has got to happen. The short answer to your question is that there is a group of economists that has called for a continuing basic income grant in South Africa for all people who fall below a certain threshold. Bear in mind that we have a very terrible economic and financial situation, because before the lockdown, 75% of South Africans were living in financial precarity. In other words, they didn't have financial security beyond 3 months or 6 months. Others, the vast majority, living in chronic poverty. So that number could have gone to 85%. So the basic income grant that is going to be proposed, which is likely to be approved, will not solve that problem. So we need municipalities that can actually create viable household food security, viable family-owned businesses. We need people to have the means to support themselves economically. And government has got to lead that, as it does in Germany, Italy, France, and other places that are highly successful and sustainable economically.
So one of the things that has, of course, caught the attention of many South Africans has been corruption. And the president says that Treasury will upload on its website all the companies that the state has done business with during this time. Is this good enough, though, Sandile Swana? Because in every COVID-19 address, he has condemned corruption. But is that in any way, shape or form going to change what seems to be endemic and systemic in our makeup as a nation?
No, it's definitely not going to be enough. It's a step in the right direction. There's a number of other steps that have to be taken in any case. One of them is the increased disclosure, as the president says. And increased disclosure starts with parties, including candidates, political candidates, disclosing fully how they are funded, because corruption is sponsored by the rich upper class, the multimillionaires who fund political parties, who fund political candidates. That's where corruption starts. Corruption starts at the top because corruption becomes a culture, and culture is determined by leadership. Leadership in business and leadership in the government system. So there is a need to change the leadership culture, and it becomes a culture of transparency. The second measure that needs to be taken, the independence of the scorpions, no matter what name you want to give them today, it must be returned, and all cases that were pending for corruption need to be reinstated so that the fathers and mothers of corruption who have destroyed the security cluster in South Africa start being investigated and prosecuted so that they get removed out of society, so that society can have breathing space and a bit of sunshine to start growing again. So there's a number of things, including the moral regeneration of South Africans, where consciences have been dying since 1994 during the Mandela presidency, when Mandela himself called for the RDP of the soul, recognizing that the consciences of South Africans at the highest level, in every municipality, in every provincial government, in every company, consciences were dying, and those consciences have not been woken up in 26 years.
Pardon my skepticism, Sandile Swana, but 26 years on, if it was a problem back in 94, it has just grown worse, and the evidence of that is clear for all to see. But how do we get away from that now? Because, Batabile Dlamini comes to mind when she said, everybody has some smolanyana skeletons. So if everybody has smolanyana skeletons, which seems to be what causes the paralysis, if you want to look at it that way, in terms of acting against those who are involved in wrongdoing, malfeasance and corruption, how do we move forward? Because surely people are not going to act against themselves.
I think South Africa is going to move forward. You must remember that some of us were born directly under apartheid in a government that wanted to destroy the local population, the indigenous population. But through struggle, we're able to overthrow that government, and where we are now with whatever degree of democracy we have. So from my point of view, even the endemic corruption, and this corruption is sponsored by the African National Congress, and they've admitted at the highest level of governance within the ANC that they are accused, number one, which means they are the ones who are leading and authoring corruption. So that is a major step forward, because we now know where to focus our energy. Now, let me then highlight why do I think that corruption will be defeated in South Africa. First of all, ordinary people like in Kolobeni, where what I think, in my personal opinion, is a corrupt mining deal was being orchestrated from the Department of Mineral and Energy, is largely being paralyzed and defeated by the ordinary masses of our people. Many municipalities are losing cases against ordinary people's, unemployed people's organizations on the ground. So the non-governmental sector and other entities outside of government and opposition parties, even Zuma was not removed because the ANC wanted to remove him. It was pressure from outside of the African National Congress that caused any progress. Even this army airplane problem that has been happening now. It is being solved not because of the ANC, but because of pressure from outside of the African National Congress. So I think our people are rising out. South Africans are rising up outside of the politics of the ANC to call for good governance actively through the courts and other structures.
And just finally, as our time is up, Sandile Swana, the president there finally, commenting on Jerusalem, the song. And it is, of course, Heritage Month and talking about Heritage Day and maybe all of us coming out and breaking a move there. Will you be dancing to Jerusalem on midnight on Sunday or on the 24th?
Always, I'm very proud of this success. It reminds me again of the great success of the other song called Inkalagata some time back. Yes, I am fully behind the Heritage Month and fully behind Jerusalem. We will be trying our moves, but I'm very stiff, of course. I don't be anything particularly beautiful, but yes, I'm also excited, yeah.
I tell you what, I'm going to hold you to it. You are going to send us yours and all the guests coming on. We want them. We're going to play them on Heritage Day, hopefully. So Sandile Swana, please, we will be waiting. I'll follow up. We're waiting for your video.
Thank you so much, Sakina. All of the best.
Thank you so much. Political analyst Sandile Swana helping us analyze South Africa going from level 2 of the nationwide lockdown to level 1, and that will come into effect on at midnight on Sunday. And don't forget your Jerusalem dance videos. We will be collecting them and we'll be sharing them. At 7 o'clock now, let's bring you the latest news.